everybody. I'm Jennifer Tryon. Welcome to So Good. This is the new show that's going to get you hooked on thread, fabric, and everything sewing. Today I'm going to be stash busting, and what that means is I'm going to be using up a lot of fabric that I already have. So if you're a paper crafter or a scrapbooker, card maker, you definitely know what a stash is. It's stuff that you already own. Paper, it can be any kind of material. But because we're going to be sewing today, I'm digging deep into my stash of fabric and I'm going to start using some of this up, both in a small project, my Sew Quick project, which today is going to be the cutest little earbuds case. You can see it. It's so cute. It's got a little zipper. It's going to be perfect for your purse to keep your headphones in. And then we've got a larger project that we're going to work on called our social project. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about that, but basically we're going to get it started during So Good, and then we're going to keep working on it and check in with each other on social media as the month goes on, and see how each other's doing. I'm going to put lots of tips and tutorials out over the month so that we can work on our social project together. And today it's going to be a big quilt. Very, very easy to do. It'll be quick for the more advanced quilters, and it'll be perfect to start anybody who's thought about doing a quilt. This social project is going to be great for you. I've got a free pattern. I'm going to put it up on the screen so you can download it. Free pattern, and it's going to help you either use up fabric that you already have, which is what I'm going to be doing. I tend to overbuy solids because every time I find a nice pattern, I buy a solid to match, and then I end up with tons of solids. So I'm going to use up my solid stash in our social project. We're also going to check in with some of your questions. So please, if you're watching from Facebook or YouTube or wherever you're watching this, please write in your questions. I'll try to get to as many of them as I can on the air. Otherwise, I'll go back through the comments after the show and make sure I get to you. And during the weeks, send me your questions and I'll try to answer them on a future episode of So Good. We're going to take some viewer questions today. People have written in ahead of time. And we're also going to check in with expert quilter, author, pattern designer, Pat Sloan. That's a very big get. I'm very excited to talk to Pat. She's going to help us decipher how to make our quilts look when we're stash busting like they don't, they haven't just come out of the bin. It's going to be a great show, and I want to get started on our first project. Okay, so for our little earbuds case, you are going to need a few coordinating fabrics. I have brought my scrap bin in, so I'm just going to pull them and we're going to die cut. But the other things you're going to need for this project, you're going to need, yes, your scraps. You're going to want to use I'm using anyway, the nested hexagon dies. This is what's going to make the shape of our earbud case. And you can use whatever shape you have. I also cut some earlier out of hearts. I have the nested hearts. The circles work great. The flower, the butterfly even. Just remember, you're going to have to sew around it. So if you're a beginner, you may want to steer clear of the circle, for example, even though that might seem easy. Getting that very symmetrical is actually a bit tougher. I like the hexagon because it's just a bunch of straight lines. So fingers crossed it all works out. So you are going to want to get your hands on the nested hexagon dies if you want to follow exactly what I'm doing. I'm also using the zips on a roll because you can see our little pouch has a great little zipper here, and that's what I think really makes it, look pro. Keep your headphones nice and safe in there. Okay. And of course I'm using the Gemini die cutting machine, and you need basic sewing supplies, pins, rotary cutter. The more you watch this show, the more you'll see how being outfitted with the right tools really does help make sure that your sewing journey is a successful one. I'm here to help. If you're just getting started sewing, tune in because you're going to pick up lots of tips and tricks, and I'm going to have experts on to help us both out. So again, you'll stay tuned for Pat Sloan. We're going to talk to her a little bit later in the show. So let's get going on our little pouch. So first things first, I think I'm going to be saying sew a lot during the show. All right, I've pulled my blue scrap bin out here, and I have two spaces that I craft in. This one and another sewing room where all the machines are back there. And I made these boxes, and this is my blue box, and it's basically just filled with scraps. And I'm just gonna pick a couple that I like, and let's see what's in here. And what I love about the Gemini is that it can cut through so many layers at once. So I'm gonna pull, and I wanna make sure, I'm gonna use the second largest size of die. So you can see you're getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sizes. So I'm going with the second largest, which I believe 3 by 3 inch. I'd have to check exactly what size that is. Maybe I'll put it in the comments, or I guess I could just measure. Let's start at 1. That's how bad of a measurer I am that I have to. Yeah, this is about the 5-inch hexagon. So get rid of my solids. I'm also going to use a wee bit of interfacing for this, but you don't have to. But if you don't use interfacing, it'll just mean that your earbud case is a little floppier. This will just make it a little more flat and sturdy, more structured. And this is an iron-on interfacing. So I can put it directly onto my outer fabric and iron it on, and it'll stick there. And I'm gonna do that before I cut my fabric. So, I mean, these all look good. Maybe that one's a different kind of blue. So what do we think? You guys, what do you like? The two patterns together? Or the solid, oh, this goes this way. The solid and the paisley. I definitely like the paisley. How about we make sure we have enough? Maybe that'll be the real tiebreaker, is if the die will fit on it. Oh, it will. Okay, well, since this is an actual cut piece, I'll leave that because maybe I can use that again, and this makes the best use of my scraps because now I've really used up my material. So I'll use this for the liner since I've just got enough for 2 pieces of that, and I'll use this for the exterior since I've got a little bit more, and I will iron on my interfacing. So on interfacing, the fusible, anyway, you don't have to use fusible, but I am here. It's got a little bit of adhesive, and I'm just going to give that a quick iron. There, it's stuck on nicely. Okay, so I need 2 of each. Technically, I'm going to be going through about 6 layers here because I've got the interfacing. So I'm just going to fold it so I know I've got just enough. More scraps for the bin. Maybe I'll give this one a press too while I'm at it. Make sure everything fits. Yep. So I'm going to cut this all at once. If you've mostly been a paper crafter, you may not realize that the coppered colored dyes are actually mixed media dyes. And that means they can go through bigger, thicker, deeper layers of whatever it is you're cutting. Paper, fabric, felt, cork, chipboard, you name it. It can go through it all. But I love using these for fabric. And if you want to go through the most, which I do, I'm going to lay down my bottom plate, my metal shim. You don't always have to use the metal shim, depends on how many layers you're doing. Going to put my fabric. Remember, I've got the interfacing on there too. My top plate, or sorry, my plastic shim, and then my top plate. And I'm just going to run it through the Gemini. And of course, you can use the Gemini Junior if that's what you have, or the larger Gemini. I tend to use my larger Gemini for a lot of quilting projects. Haha! It makes such quick work and such perfect cuts right through the stabilizer and all. And now everything is perfectly lined up. And because I ironed that on ahead of time, we're not trying to match up anything. Everything's, look, it's so well meshed together. Okay, I'm gonna pull these apart. There we go. Just gonna give that another press. Make sure everything stays nice and together. Now we've made really good use of our fabric. Now there are some of you out there that might even keep the tiniest little bit. You go for it, but this is good for me. Actually, I'm wrong. I am gonna use this. You know what I'm gonna use it for? I wonder if I can get a little tab. Oh, maybe there's not quite enough. Maybe I'll pull this other piece that we were talking about before. Because I do want, on the earbud case, you can see there's a little tab here, and that's so that I've got something to pull against when I pull my zipper. So I'll use that third color for that tab. Look at me using up all these scraps. My iron turned off, but now we're back in business. I know people like auto shut off because then their house doesn't burn down, but when you need to keep the iron handy, you know, auto shut off, it's not always for me. All right. So I'm done with my cutting plates for now, and I'm done with my dies for now, so I can tidy this up a little bit, try to have a fairly tidy sewing, who am I kidding? Who am I kidding? There's never a tidy sewing space. It's always a jumble, but I'm trying to have some good new habits in 2020, you guys. Okay, so with the top of my hexagon, I'm actually going to cut it in half. And that's because I need a place for the zipper to go. So I'm going to fold it in half. This way I get exactly on my center line. And I'm actually going to just press it with the iron. You could just finger press it, but I've got it here, and then I'll just be super accurate. And then with my rotary cutter, I'm going to line that right up on my mat. I'm using the nice big Threaders folding mat here. It's nice to have a really large cutting mat. Now, you could use your scissors if you don't have a rotary cutter, but if you're going to start doing some sewing, or if you're a sewer, you know the value of a rotary cutter, because look at how beautifully it slices. It's sort of like a pizza cutter on steroids, like super sharp. So next up, I'm going to take my zips on a roll. Now, if you don't know what zips on a roll are, I'm going to grab some. That's exactly what they are. Zippers on a roll. And they are the handiest thing to have in your sewing space or in your sewing bin, because you get lots and lots of different zipper heads and a humongous, I think it's 5, 6, 7, I don't know how many meters, I've taken them out of the box, but really, really long lengths of zipper. Now, you're probably not going to use, 5 meters of zipper, but you will over time. And I love having lots of different colors that I can come and bring to my project and decide, okay, what goes, ooh, that looks nice. What goes with what? Oh, I think I even have a red down here. Yes, I want to try this red. That pink looks good. So does that red. That's close. I don't think, oh, maybe even the green. There's even some of this green in here too. What does everybody think? Do we like the green? I'm gonna hold it up here so you can see. Do we like the green with it? The pink with it? I've got Ty behind the camera today. Ty, what do you think? Pink, green, you like the pink? All right. You didn't even wait to look for the red. The red looks cute too. You like pink?
Yeah.
All right, Ty wins. Leave me a comment, let me know what you like. I always wanna know, because these are the kinds of thing that you will make up for stocking stuffers. If you start making them now, start putting them away. They're just quick little 30-minute project, something you can pull off quickly in an afternoon just to get your sewing fix in. Okay, so a couple tips when dealing with zips on a roll, and I'll let you learn from my failings, is not to run the zippers off the wrong end of the roll, because then you'll have a bit of waste. So back the zippers up, leave the one that you want, and just measure out your length. So I'm gonna leave myself a little extra. I can snip that off after. And just be sure not to run it off the end once you've cut your length. And I love that no zipper really gets wasted with zips on a roll. If you were buying a zipper in the store, you'd probably get like 8 inches or 10 inches or whatever. And you'd still cut it off and then throw the rest away. This way you're measuring out exactly the length of zipper that you need for your project. Okay, so I've cut my zipper, I've got my 2 pieces for my top. I also want to cut 2 pieces of the lining fabric. And again, just lining up those that finger press mark on my mat, and right in half with my rotary cutter. And while I'm cutting, I may as well cut my tab. So I'm gonna measure maybe 2 by 3 inches. I'm gonna first square up the edge. I've got this pinking on the edge, so I'll just square it up. Square it up just means have a freshly cut straight edge. So you may see some patterns say square it up or true it up. It just means get rid of whatever kind of fraying bit or manufacturer's edge was there and start with your own fresh cut, perfectly straight edge. Then you know what you're dealing with. So I'll go over 3. I always tend to count by touching my rotary cutter to the inch mark, because I don't totally trust my math skills or trust them at all. So that's why I do that, because I literally can screw up even counting, let alone actually measuring. So again, I'm gonna square up my end because I know I have a good end here. I'm lining my straight squared up edge with the line on my on my cutting mat. And then I'm gonna line up the edge of my ruler with the line on my cutting mat. And then that's how I know I'm getting a square edge. And this is why using a rotary cutter and ruler is so much better in sewing than cutting with scissors. So let's go 3 by 1, 2 inches should be good. In the bin. And I'm going to use my iron, and I'm going to iron in half. So I'll iron this little piece in half. And then in half again. One side, it's all right if I leave my iron down there for a minute. One side towards the middle, using lots of steam here. And then the other side towards the middle. And then the whole thing folded in half so that I've got a nice straight steam, and I'm gonna give it a good steaming. So we talk about ironing in quilting and in projects where we use fabric, but really what we mean is pressing, typically, unless you're getting wrinkles out. But pressing literally means pressing down on the fabric, letting the iron just sort of sit there for a second, giving it a little bit of steam. Instead of the old-fashioned sort of back and forth, you're really pressing, and that's just sort of to get those perfectly crisp edges. And that's what we've got here, and this will be our little tab that we can pull from. That's going to be really cute. Okay, so you should have a bottom piece, a liner piece that are intact, and then top pieces that are cut in half with both the liner and your outer fabric that has the interfacing on it. Your tab, and of course our zipper. So I'm going to get rid of my stash box there, and I'm going to bring up my sewing machine. Normally, I wouldn't keep it on the floor, but for you guys, I set it aside here so I could bring it up. Okay, so I am going to use the zipper foot. So for the zipper foot, do I have one out here? I have it out. Most sewing machines will let you just push the button at the back and change the foot. And get rid of the menu. And your new foot will just snap into place. And I'm all threaded. Bobbin thread tends to be my lot in life where I never seem to have enough bobbin thread. So I'm going to make sure I have a fresh bobbin. It's always good to start with a fresh bobbin and a fresh needle. Now, you're gonna wanna sew for, some people say anywhere between 5 and 8 hours on one needle. I know I've definitely gone longer. I've also gone shorter, but a fresh needle really will help, especially if you're starting a big project like a quilt. So you wanna make sure you have bobbin thread in and that your machine is properly threaded. Now, if you follow me on social media or you subscribe to my blog, then there'll be lots of tutorials and stuff on how to thread a sewing machine and all that kind of fun stuff. I'll leave you to thread your own machine this time, but if you have questions, let me know. Okay, got my little bowl of pins and clips. And I'm going to take my zipper and I'm going to start with my first outer piece, and I'm going to go pretty side down on the center of my zipper. Sorry, let me say that again. I'm going to put my zipper down. I'm going to go pretty side down on the opposite edge. So if I'm laying my zipper in front of me like this, I'm going to bring my piece and have it laying over top of the entire zipper. And I'm going to either pin or clip it. I've got clips, so let's just clip. Sometimes pinning zippers are a little tougher, but whatever you've got. Both will work just fine. And then on the other side, I'm going to do the exact same step. Sorry, I shouldn't have clipped that whole thing just yet. I'm going to line up the bottom on the same side and make sure they're flush the whole way down. So I've got my liner fabric and my outer fabric on either side of the zipper. And just making sure it is staying flush the whole way. And then I'm going to go ahead and make sure that my stitch is pushed all the way over because the reason I'm using the zipper foot is so that I can get nice and hugged right up close. So you can do, I just did 3 slow stitches to start, and then I went 3 back to lock it in. That just makes sure nothing is going to fall apart. And when I get to the part where my zipper is going to be in the way, I'm just moving it up slightly. Just make sure you're not running it off the track. And then when I get to the end, I'm back stitching a couple again to lock it in. And then you can see here what this is going to look like. And then the back. So now you're not going to see any, so the front's going to look like this, and the inside has the nice side showing too. Okay, so I'm just going to do the same to the other side. But I am going to first go ahead and top stitch this down. So first I'm going to press it. And then the top stitching is going to help this lay nice and flat in place and not get curled up or anything. So again, I'm going to go right over it, this time top stitching, and then I'll do the other side. Something's getting a little jammed there. And don't try to sew too fast, especially if you're just getting started. It takes much longer to pick out your stitches than it does to sew slower. But look at how beautiful that is. It's nice and top stitch, everything is even. That looks nice. Nice and neat on the inside too. Okay, I'm gonna do the other side. So same thing. Make sure everything's lined up, starting on one side and bringing it right to the edge. I'll put a little clip just until I can bring over my liner. And my liner is also going pretty side down, making sure everything is sandwiched completely even. And then clipping again. This is a great little project to do with teenagers, anybody who's sort of, maybe expressed an interest in sewing, but is sort of afraid to take on something big, this is the perfect project. So many people have earphones that are, if you're like me, tangled in your purse. You spend half your life trying to untangle them. And it's really practical and a great way to use lots of different skills, like straight sewing, adding a zipper, interfacing, and yeah, you'll get good quick. All right, so again, using the zipper foot, a few stitches to start, back stitch, and nice and steady. Back stitch, so look at the difference in how this one would lie, even just finger pressing it, in how it would look with or without the top stitching. This is when you can really tell. I'm going to show the top camera here. Look at how nice and flat this one is and how this one just springs up. That's why the pressing and the top stitching is really important. So I'm going to press this and top stitch it. You can totally press over your zipper. And top stitching. Back stitch a few. All right, this is where you'll really see whether you lined up your hexes in the right spot. It looks pretty good. This one could be a little further this way, but it's not the end of the world if it's not perfectly symmetrical. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put a few stitches just in the end of the zipper, just because I don't want to risk that coming off, and I want everything to stay nice and straight. So you could switch back to your regular zigzag foot now. I'm just going to use the zipper foot since it's on here. No big deal. Just a couple stitches across the end of the zipper. Now, if I was doing a zipper stop, I would do a very small, tight zigzag stitch or like a satin stitch, but I'm just going to use the regular stitches to go back and forth just a couple of times. All right. It's already looking so cute. Good call on the pink tie. All right. Okay, so before I sew the whole thing together, I want to add my tab at this point. It might seem like the tab would be the last thing, but you want to make sure it gets hidden, it gets sewn on so that the seams get hidden in the bulk of the, or in the inside of the bag. So I'm going to change back to my regular, I can use a 1/4 inch foot or just my zigzag foot. Here it is. Just your zigzag foot is fine. And I'm just going to sew down the ends of both sides of the tab. basically this is just like top stitching it down so that it lays nice and flat, because we already know that it's in place because we've pressed it. But again, top stitching keeps everything nice and professional looking. Remember, for little things, moving the needle on your machine is helpful. You don't always have to move your material. Often keeping your material centered underneath your presser foot keeps it flattest, and then go ahead and move the needle like I am here, all the way to the end. That way your feed dogs get totally across the back of your fabric. Just means a straighter stitch. There. I'll snip off a few of these ends. May as well just do that now. Got my nice little Crafter's Companion snips. These are so sharp, love them. Okay, now fold in half. And I am gonna give this a little press, just because pressing makes everything nicer. If you're gathering that by now, I assume. Remember to leave me your questions. I'm dying to hear from you. I'll go back through the questions at the end of the show too and comment on them myself, and be sure to write in. I'm going to take a viewer question once I'm done this project, and I've got Pat Sloan, quilter and author, on standby. She is going to be joining us in just a little bit for some great quilting tips. She's just a wealth. So I hope you're following her. Yeah, so we'll check in with her soon. But first I'm adding this tab, and I'm just gonna overlap it at the end of one of the zipper points. It doesn't really matter which end. Yeah, it doesn't really matter which end. So I'll put it on this end here. And you're gonna want it, it's a little counterintuitive, but you're going to put it facing inwards. But this is so that the seam gets encapsulated sort of on the rough edge, and then just sew it in place. I would reinforce this, like I would go over it maybe 3 times, just because this is where the bulk of the muscle is going to happen here. We're going to be pulling on this when we're pulling the zipper, so let's make sure it's in there nice and tight. So I went over it once, I'm back stitching one more time, plus I'm going through the zipper, so let's make sure that's nice, and then I'm going over it one more time. Nice and slow. Okay. So now you can see the tab is on there, but it's facing the wrong way. But it will, once we get this down and sewn together, it will eventually stick out the right direction. So don't feel like you're doing it wrong if that's how it looks. All right, we're almost there, you guys. I told you this was a quick one. So you just want to make sure you're going in the right order now so that things match up. So your bottom fabric is going to go down first, pretty side down. And then, oh, this one got a little bent. And then your top fabric is actually going to go right side up. That's because once we turn this right side out, it's all going to make sense. And the other tip I want to give you is now's the time to open your zipper so that we can turn it right side out. If you forget to open your zipper at this point, you're going to have a very hard time turning it right side out. So now you can pin or clip, whichever you've got. And now your bottom will be slightly bigger than your top. That's okay. It's because this side was cut in half. Just make sure you're sewing around the top side so that everything matches up in the end. So I'll just use a few of my clips. You can see the bottom is just slightly bigger, but no one will ever know once we get that stitched. Remember, you're keeping the tab inside. You're not sewing it on the, you don't let it be sticking out. And now I'm just using about a 1/4 inch seam. You could go up to a 1/2 if you're more comfortable with a 1/2, but the bigger your seam, the smaller your bag. It's negligible, but still. And you want to make sure you're keeping things nice and straight. So you want to probably start on a straightaway, not on a corner. So I'm going to start on this one straightaway here, just in the center. I'm going to center my needle again, about 1/4 inch. And once I get to a point, I'm going to stop. I'm going to lift my presser foot and pivot, keeping about 1/4 inch seam again. This is going to ensure that I have points for my hexagon. Stop and pivot. Now if your zipper's in the way, you might have to do some finagling. My zipper is too far towards one end here, so I'm just going to push it down just while I sew over this part. If you go too far, like past your point, just back stitch and get it centered up again. So while I still can, I'm going to make sure that my zipper is open as far as I can get it open. Because I'm about to sew shut the entire thing. Okay, it's nice and open. And then just meet up to your original stitches and back stitch. It's almost done, you guys. Okay, resist the urge to turn it right side out right away. I know you want to see it, but resist. I'm going to take my bigger scissors and now just trim off what you don't need. I don't need this extra zipper. I don't even really need a lot of this bulk. So the more you can trim off, don't go too close to your seam because you don't want anything coming out, but you can definitely trim off any extra bulk. Definitely want to trim off the ends of the zipper. Okay. Now, maybe you have a knitting, oh, look at that little tab, so cute. If you have a knitting needle or a kind of a dull pencil, anything with a pointy edge, I can use the edge of the scissor as long as I'm kind of careful I don't cut. It's probably bad to do that, but I am. Now, if it's not pointy, okay, let me turn it right back out first. To get a sharper point on your hexie, you kind of want to snip off the points. So I'm going to trim the points off just so I can get as close to the stitching. That way I get a sharper point once I turn it right side out. Just do not cut your stitches. All right, you guys hanging in here? Almost done. Everybody let me know where you're joining in from. I love hearing where everyone's from. Aw, it's so cute. All right, I can give it a little press. Make sure. I would not recommend using your scissors, you guys. Use something else. I'm actually a little scared I'm gonna like cut through it, but I don't have anything other than those. Well, I have like a little seam guide here from the sewing machine. I could try that. There we go. If you use something pokey, you'll really get your edges out. Just don't poke right through. I've done that before. I love it so much. All right, there's one. And so now, a cute little extra pouch for my earbuds. This is cute. I know I've said that a bunch of times, but I really love these. And they really come together so quickly. I always love when I've attached something with a zipper and it actually works. You could put a little key ring on here too, if you wanted. Just loop it through and you can attach it to the side of your purse and you've always got it. And you could use this as a change purse. You could use it for medication. You could use it for hair elastics. Who knows, whatever, I mean, whatever you need a little pouch for, this is just a beautiful, brilliant little project and just a great way to use up your stash. Okay, I am gonna head over to the other room because I would like to, I'm gonna bring back my stash box and we're gonna check in with Pat Sloan. Okay, we're gonna take a quick viewer question, and this is a good one because we're always wondering how to best use up our scraps and coordinate our scraps so they don't look like they've just come out of the scrap pile. So this question comes to us from Penny on Facebook, and she's asking, when I'm using up my scraps, how do I best coordinate the colors so it doesn't look like it's just a bunch of leftovers? This is a good one, and I'm going to bring in expert quilter, quilt author, fabric designer, and creator of the Quilt Fun, Pat Sloan. Hi, Pat. She's joining us from her sewing room in Virginia. Thank you so much for joining us on So Good.
Oh, hi, Jen. Thank you for inviting me. This is so exciting and such a great question.
Very good question from Penny. So what do we do when we're wanting to use up our stash, but we don't want our quilt to, once we've sewn it all together, look like a bunch of leftovers?
Right. One of the things people talk about is having what I would call, and a lot of people call it, controlled scrappy, so that you actually bring your fabric into a color set or a group of colors so that it's not everything in the kitchen sink, because most people don't really want to put like their Civil War fabric and their children's prints in the same quilt.
Right, that's a good point. So what I've done here, you can kind of see in the background, is I've got boxes full of blues, pinks, oranges, neutrals, but are you saying I should really pare that down even a little further?
Well, I have an example. This might show you. I did a couple blocks, and I thought that if I show you this, it might help a little bit, because here is one where I have a lot of different blues. So this is still using blue, but I used, this is a traffic jam block of mine, and it has a lot of different shades, light, dark, and then I did all four corners, really a different fabric. But if you look at this one, and I'll show you the second one, it has everything much more controlled. So there is almost solid, darker blues, and then the four corners are all the same color. So if you took your blue bin and controlled the different blues that you took, you can make it all more cohesive and held together.
And what about mixing high volume and low volume? If you're doing something scrappy, should you try to keep it all the same temperature?
Well, it depends on the person. I have a question I ask people, are you a hardcore scrap quilter? Which means you don't mind seeing everything sort of a mishmash and all those different colors don't bother you. But a lot of people, that's hard for them. So I find bringing everything more controlled ends up with a result they like that's better. But I have one more sample. Do we have time for that?
Yeah, let's see it. Let's see it.
Okay, so this is where all the centers are different fabrics, from green to purple to orange to red. But what I did is I controlled the four corners with this dark charcoal. And that holds all of those colors together. So anytime that somebody wants to take everything but the kitchen sink and throw it in, if you take one solid or tonal to tie it together, that can help make it more cohesive.
And now for me, I'm currently holding on to a lot of solids. Can I use solids in a scrappy quilt, or should I stick to all solids if I'm going to use solids?
I think you can pop solids in there. I do it. I don't really have a problem with that. It's a color. If you have just if you have mostly solids and then just a few prints, the prints will draw your eye. So if that is good for you, great. If not, then maybe mix it so it's at least half and half.
And just leave us with a final bit of advice. And, you know, my kind of feeling when it comes to a scrappy quilt is I feel like you're best to use it up rather than have it sitting on the shelf. Is that sort of where you live too?
Yes, I agree. You know, it doesn't do you any good sitting in a bin on your shelf. And if you really love those fabrics, you can make it work. Just pick something as a helper fabric to make it all tie together.
I love that advice. Thank you so much, Pat. Pat Sloan, you can check her out on YouTube. You can follow her on Facebook. She's got a world of advice on social media. So we're going to take those tips now and we're going to take them to our social project. And the social project is a bigger quilt that we're going to make over the next few months here on So Good. Now, I want you to check in periodically on social media for extra tips along the way, but I'm going to get started using Pat's advice and picking some of my scraps now so we can get started on this project. Thanks, Pat.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so I've pulled my big stack of extra solids. Now this is a stash buster versus a scrap buster. Scrap is just a bunch of pieces of whatever mismatched. A stash buster is really grabbing hold and using up a ton of fabric that's been sitting on your shelf. And for me, that's solids. Now for you, it might be something totally different. Take a look at your fabric stash and see what you need to get rid of. Or you can always order more fabric. I'm all for that too. But I'm going to use up solids because look at how many I have, because sometimes I just buy solids by the bolt and I need to cut them up and I need to make use of them. So I have written a quilt pattern. It's called the Starburst Stash Buster, and it's a free download for you. So you can click on the link that we've got here in the description. And this is our social project. And I'll just go over again, in case you're just tuning in, the social project is one that we're gonna start on So Good. So we're gonna start the project tonight, or today, and we're gonna finish it over the coming weeks, and we'll follow each other on social media. So I hope you're following me on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and all the places. And you'll be able to check in on So Inspiring and the Crafter's Companion page. There'll be lots of posts and lots of tips on how to keep going on this project. So you're gonna start by downloading, and I'm just gonna show you quickly because when I was writing the pattern, I had to make it also just to make sure it turned out. So take a look at what we're gonna be. This is the Starburst quilt, and I just love it. In the very center, it's kind of hard to totally see here, but I'll hold it up. In the very center, you get that great burst happening. Do you see it? And it's just a beautiful rainbow effect that I'm using. But again, whatever solids you're pulling, remember Pat said to try to coordinate a little bit. So I've put, you know, coral with a lighter coral, pink with a darker pink, and I just sort of kept going in that vein since I'm using solids. But if you're using a print, just like Pat said, try to pull out ones that work well together before you start sewing. Okay, so we are going to finish this, or at least parts of it, on social media over the coming weeks, but I'm going to get started cutting today. So I'm going to take my first, I'm going to try to keep these in twos, so I'm going to be sort of keeping my colors together. So my first strip, I'm going to use yardage of navy, and I'm using the Threader's Shape Creator. Now this looks like sort of a floppy placemat, but it's not. It's a cutting ruler. And so if you're new to sewing, you'll love how easy this is. And if you've been cutting with a ruler and rotary cutter for years, you can go ahead and do that. But I'm going to show you how to use this new tool because it really prevents you from doing any kind of slip-ups in your cutting. So I want to make sure when I'm using the Shape Creator that I'm going salvage to salvage. So I've got about 2 yards here. I probably only really need 1 yard, so I probably don't need to cut it all up. So I'll just keep the other half for another time. Okay, so salvage to salvage. And salvage is the manufacturer's end. There usually will be like a bit of a woven part, but it's the end you're not cutting. So salvage to salvage, and then I'm going to fold it in half again. And you can use this if you're just plain old rotary cutting too. Make sure it's nice and flat. We don't want, see, I've got a bit of a seam in there, so why don't I just press it out? May as well do it right the first time. Save doing it twice. I wish I lived by that, but I really don't, but I'm trying to set a good example. This is where you can iron instead of press. All right. Now, if you want to make sure you're nice and crisp, you can go ahead and iron again. May as well. And then I'm just folding in half again. And so the more pressed or the more even your yardage is, I find the more even my cutting is. Okay. So I'm going to start with my one salvage. I've got one salvaged end and another salvaged end, but I'm going to try to square it up as much as I can. Remember, squaring up, that means just starting with a fresh edge. And what I like about this ruler is that it comes with a 0 line. Your average ruler doesn't have a 0 line. And what this means is line it up best you can on your mat, and then just over the salvage where you want to cut off, that's where you're going to lay your 0 line. And make sure that it's lined up with a line on your mat. And there's also a big line on the bottom edge of the shape creator. Just make sure that's running flush with a line on your mat, and then the 0 is running flush with a line on your mat. And the 0 is your starting point. And now on the ends of all of these, I don't know if you can see them, but there's diamonds. There's a little slot for you to put your rotary cutter right in there. Can the camera see that? See how the rotary cutter is right in that slot? And then that prevents you from slipping off and going out of line. So you're just going to hold down and slice right up to the other slot. And then don't move a thing. Typically, with your ruler, you'd have to slide it over and push things around. Now, from 0, I'm just going to go all the way over to 10, which is exactly what our pattern says we need. So if we're looking at the pattern, it says make groups of 10 of 2 coordinating light and dark fabrics. So that's what we're going to do. And we're going to need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of each color. So I'm just going to go ahead and start cutting 10-inch squares of each color. So once I've gone over 10, then I can move it. And then I can either turn it or I can turn the shape creator, and I'm going to go over 10 again. So again, starting with 0 and squaring things up. Starting with my 0 line. Yep, got it all. And then over to 10. And then look at that. All at once, I was able to cut 6, 7, 8. All 8 of the squares that I need just from one fold using the shape creator. It's a really great way, great use of time, very accurate and easy, especially for anyone that's beginning to cut with a rotary cutter and ruler. All right, why don't I do it one more time, and then I'll leave you guys for this week. And we'll continue cutting over the next week. I'll check in on social media, and then you'll be able to start, well, get as far as you can in the pattern until our next show. I'm gonna go ahead and cut all of my squares, and I'm gonna start making them into half square triangles. Next week around this time, I will post exactly how to make a half square triangle if you're not familiar, but a little online tutorial, so you can watch for that on your feeds. So let's just cut one more. Again, I only need 1 yard, not 2, or 1 meter, not 2. And you know, the cutting of fabric is sometimes what people dread or worry that they're gonna waste or think, oh, I can't do it. The sewing, I'd be okay, but when you have some cool tools like this, it really makes it a breeze. Like cutting with the Gemini for the smaller projects, cutting with some of these bigger tools for the bigger projects, it's great. And the thing that's great about sewing supplies is that you use them over and over and over, the same tools over and over. So they really are a good investment. Trying to remember which way I folded the other one. Well, it doesn't really matter so long as it's squared up, but I think I did it, no, this way, yeah. Okay. We've got a very short piece over here. This is what's messing things up. So salvage to salvage. need to invent a folding tool. That's what I really need. Sometimes when you get the fabric from the store, it's just sort of cut wonky, and then it's up to you to sort of figure it out after that. But when you can get the fold right, it really does save some time in cutting. So I'll take a minute to get the fold right. There we go. Okay, now for this one, for whatever reason, I don't quite have 10 going this way, so I can't just square it up. So what I'm gonna do is I'll square up one side with my 0 line, and I'll basically cut strips, and then I'll turn them to cut the square. So my 0 line, all lined up in the channel. Don't move anything, just go over to 10. Over to 10, and now can I get another 10 if I move my 0 line over to where I had 10? Yep, I can get another 10. Another 10 in the channel. And I like that it's in the channel, it never slips out. So now I've got two 10-inch strips and my selvage is perfectly cut off. Now I'll set one aside and I'm gonna turn this again. Now I can open this up and do exactly the same thing. Make sure it's flush along the edge. Put my 0 line down. So leave me a comment whether or not you are going to participate in this little social quilt along. It's gonna be pretty fun. I'm debating whether we should start a whole Facebook group and all of that. Okay, so there's half. And I'm just gonna keep on, that's 4. I'm just gonna cut another 4 here. I hope you will follow along. It's always more fun when we get lots of people doing it. A year or two back, I did a quilting sew along. That pattern is still buried somewhere on my Facebook page. It was a daisy quilt, and lots of you guys did it. It was really, really fun. So I hope you will participate in this one too. I can't wait to see what fabrics you pull from your stash. So that's the 0 line, and I'm just gonna go over to 10. Got it. Okay, and there's my 8 coordinating. So I've got a whole pile of cutting to do here. It's gonna take me, well, it won't take too long. Once you get a rhythm, it goes pretty quickly, but not so quick to do the whole thing on camera. So I'll work on it throughout the week. I hope you will work on it throughout the week too. Be sure to download your free pattern because I want you to, well, participate. It's free, no cost to you. Use up your scraps, use up your stash. And if you make the little cute earbud pouch or change purse or whatever you want to use it for, I totally want to see what fabrics you choose for that too. So lastly, I want to leave you with something I'm calling my so necessary items. We're really playing on the word so here. And the items that I found so necessary this week were definitely the Gemini nested hexagons, the threaders zips on a roll, the shape creator, the rotary cutter, and honestly, all the staple sewing supplies, I'm always going to find those so necessary. But when you have a few cool tools like that, it really does make the job so much easier. I want to say a special thank you to Pat Sloan for coming to us today and helping answer our viewer questions from her sewing room in Virginia. Thank you, Pat, again. And thank you for tuning in to the first episode of Sew Good. We are going to be back the first Saturday of every month, and then we're going to continue with this social project throughout the weeks until the next show. So stay tuned on social media. I hope you've joined the So Inspiring Facebook group, and I hope you're following me on Facebook and Instagram, as I'll be posting tons of tips and tutorials about how to continue with this pattern. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.